Good morning again. This is Jonathan Small, host and producer of Face to Face. Face to Face is a talk show, one of two different talk shows that I broadcast live to tape every week at Wynn Studio in Windsor, Connecticut. And Face to Face is a show that's designed to ask my guests the hard questions and give you, the viewers, the answers and information that you deserve to know. This afternoon, actually, we have a pleasant surprise guest that is involved in many different areas of commercial and residential real estate development. He has a historical background, and he is part of a big major development transformation in a section of the city of Charlotte, North Carolina. The guest this afternoon on Face to Face is no other than a commercial real estate developer of eFix Development Corporation, to go along with eFix Housing, no other than Christopher Dennis. Good afternoon, Christopher. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm so excited to be talking with you and sharing experiences I've had over the years working not only in the community but also specifically working with the Baysford Road corridor.
Okay. Well, it's our pleasure to have you here this afternoon, Christopher. Could you kind of let people know a little bit about yourself and background briefly before we get into our main topics of discussion?
Well, I'll tell people, the first thing I tell people, I'm a game changer and I'm a man of faith, and that's what drives me.
Mm-hmm.
My background is 22 years retired military, so I'm a veteran. I worked at Bank of America for 13 years. I ran a trading floor, so I have extensive background knowledge in finance. And got my MBA from Queen's University here in Charlotte, which I learned a lot more about economics. So my background is I spent 15 years working in communities. I was the president for the Lockwood community, which is on the north side of the community. And that's kind of where I really got my understanding of the need to support and help maintain and stabilize communities. Because I saw a community that was similar to Baysford Road that was going through transformation and change. And I wanted to make sure that I was a part of that change. So that drove a lot of my early on engagement in looking at ways to invest, but also help drive stability in communities.
Okay, Christopher, this area of West Charlotte, or the West End of Charlotte, is a section of the city that has a historical background. Let's say a community that consists of a long period of time of many professional African-American Black people, businesses, professional people. It has a close proximity to uptown Charlotte, but I want you to kind of give a breakdown of the history a little bit of the West section, or the West End of Charlotte, or whatever exactly is called in your definition.
So it's the West End. So the West End is amazing. And when I talk about Charlotte, and you talk about the passion and drive for Charlotte, the West End corridor of Charlotte was historically been predominantly a Black area in Charlotte, and that area consists of a lot of history that I think that culminates to the Black culture. You find Johnson Smith University, which is a historic college that is, I think, prevalent across the states, and it sits in the heart of the West End. And then you've got places like the historic Excelsior Club. I mean, if you ever came to Charlotte back in the early 2000s and wanted to go somewhere and you were over 30, just remember over 30, you would have partied at the historic Excelsior Club, which is now being renovated and redeveloped. You've got amazing places like the 5 Points Center, which is again right across from Johnson Smith, and going down, you've got a plethora of churches that have been iconic in the redevelopment and the providing religious services to all residents across Charlotte from all different areas. That the Park Baptist Church is there, and you've got so many others that are there, and also the House of Prayer, which is huge in the center of the Baysford Road area. And at the corners, you got Baysford Road and the South, which is actually two of the locations you see behind me. They played a major part in some of the history going back dating. You've got places like the McDonald's cafeteria that was actually originally sitting with, you see the Chase Bank on the end over here, that was McDonald's cafeteria. And Mr. McDonald played a major part of the history and change of the West End corridor by being one of the first Afro-Americans to actually own the cafeteria, but then also eventually going on to own a hotel and also a fun park. So West Charlotte has been a major icon for the city of Charlotte, which also included schools like the West. I can't leave out West Charlotte, which has always been a prestigious high school, and now it's being revitalized. But then also you got other schools like the Northwest School of the Arts, which sits in the West End as well. So the West End has been a icon for the city of Charlotte. It's been an area where predominantly the Afro-American population has been in Charlotte. It's changing. It's going through a lot of change, and I think the history plays a major part in that. And I'm excited about some of the changes happening, but also maintaining some of the original culture of that community. I think is vital to when we talk about the West End.
Well, the West End of Charlotte has been able to keep many of its businesses and housing intact, because you hear so many times throughout the country that urban renewal projects are dividing up the city with highways and other forms of infrastructure kind of has eroded many of your urban areas. I mean, I think it's classified as urban renewal projects that has taken place all over the country. Has Charlotte, North Carolina, or let's just say the West End of Charlotte, North Carolina, experienced any urban renewal projects over the past decades that has kind of, let's say, had a major impact in a negative way towards the West End of Charlotte, or has it been in a positive way?
I'll start by saying I think across the board in all cities we see change that happens. Change is inevitable, and we know change happens. The one thing I'll say from a negative standpoint is, and this is coming from a developer that wears a community hat, and anyone that talks to me knows that I'm going to share my heart, and you're going to get a candid conversation, and I want to tell you I'm always real. I think that as overall, we've not done a true justice to any corridor when it comes to being able to talk about the change that's happening, and we study it, we research it, and we constantly see that by the end of the cycle of research and studying, those neighborhoods are gentrified, and the people that are there are normally displaced. So I'll put that out there first. But I'll also say, to the benefit of it, that I think that we're starting to get it right. And what does that mean? Being more intentional. And we talk about in Charlotte, Biddleville, Brooklyn, some of the older neighborhoods that have been gentrified and went through urban renewal. And now we talk about the historic West End corridor. And the reason why I said, I started off with that point, because now we're being more intentional. And I think we're now in a sense where we're realizing that we have to truly be intentional and take ownership in how to develop and do private and public partnerships that are engaging of the businesses and also the communities. So the city of Charlotte launched a initiative called the Corridors of Opportunities. And I'll tell you, that was a major project that kicked off, where the city kind of looked at areas that were marginalized in the areas and decided to put, once it was $26 million into a fund to be able to help uplift those corridors. That money was spanned out across 6 corridors, but Baysville Road received a large chunk of that to kind of help spark some of the development and help drive people home. From my standpoint and looking at it, is being able to get developers and homeowners and communities to work together. You've got partners that are working behind the scenes, like Historic West End Partners, different community organizations like HOWENA and so forth, that are all working in tandem to try and figure out how to make sure that intentionality that I talked about in the beginning of the conversation really is being intentional of looking at how do we sustain, how do we grow, how do we create open mobility, and work with the private and the public sector to be able to bring development and also bring resources to uplift the community within, but also as change happens, ensuring that change does not affect the full culture. And I think that's the key thing. So I'd say 2 things urban renewal projects have happened. One is the Corridors Opportunity, and that's the city being a little bit intentional about how to drive some of that change and getting dollars to this community. But then also you have on the other side a bigger initiative that came in which a lot of people know about opportunity zones. And that's a little bit more complex because that's on the that action was countrywide, that wasn't specifically located in Charlotte. And the corridors of opportunity played a major part because the corridors of opportunity allowed investors who were seeking some tax shelters to be able to invest and provide funding in marginalized areas as a part of the government plan to create, in a sense, the urban renewal projects initiatives. And that was a huge lift. And so you can look at that as positive or negative, but again, that funded dollars and sparked development in these areas. So again, I think the answer to the question, I think the Western Corridor is a product of initiatives that are being combined from a public and a private standpoint to be more intentional, to drive change that's positive and create the outcomes of mobility, sustainability, and also creating business and opportunities that will benefit the community. The piece I'll add to that is that the community has to play a part in that role of making sure that the programs that come in that are considered to be urban renewal, that we do checks and balances and we hold people accountable, because even though dollars are flowing into our communities and these communities, we have to make sure that we're holding accountable the developers and also the individuals that are investing in these areas to say, guys, look, we understand that urban renewal and gentrification is real and they come with change, but let's be intentional and make sure that we've got our foot on the pedal and our eyes on the board to see what change is happening and helping drive that change from a community standpoint. So it's getting everyone at all levels to be engaged and play a part in what we want and how our communities are reshaping. And I think those are some of the initiatives that are doing it. And there's a model that came out of DC called the Main Street Initiative that is kind of shaping some of the stuff they're doing in the West End Corridor. So there's a lot of initiatives that are happening, and it's just getting everyone on the same accord and having everyone understand the impacts of how those initiatives will play out in the long term and getting the community to be what the community really wants it to be.
Okay, Christopher, that's a good, fair assessment of the issues related towards urban renewal. But let's get to the nuts and bolts of reality. It's been reported through data statistics that in Charlotte, North Carolina, you need an income somewhere between $50,000 to $60,000 per year to really sustain yourself with the high cost or the higher cost of housing that's increasing and just the overall cost of living. Now, if you go into the West End of Charlotte, do you have the type of things, the businesses, the development? I know you have a direct proximity link to Uptown, and that's another question. Is there a link of the residents being able to go to Uptown, be gainfully employed, bring back the revenue stream to the West End of Charlotte, and really be able to keep the dollars in the West End of Charlotte, because you have not only the businesses, but you have the mentality and the mindset to realize you need to own, control, and have a direct stake in your own community? Or is West Charlotte like pretty much any urban area throughout the country where the dollar is going out, particularly the Black dollar, within 6 hours, and basically the low-paying jobs, the lack of businesses, and the wealth base, the home ownership base is all lagging? I'll just let you define exactly what is really taking place on that microscope of the West End of Charlotte.
Now, John, I would say you load that question up. That's a hard question to answer. I'll start off as it's a hard question, but it's a great question. And I think you laid out a lot of reality of facts in there. And I think the Black dollar circulates a lot faster, leaves our community a lot faster than 6 hours. And I think that's where the challenge comes in. And Jonathan, you hit that right on the head. When I say that's a great question, and it's where we all lean in and ask ourselves why. So I'll start off by answering the first part of that question. Is the West End being impacted that way? And yes, the dollars in the West End corridor, I think, leave that community faster than it circulates within the community. And let me tell you why. This community has been marginalized for a long time. And now that the opportunity and people being intentional to try and change that, when people, the narrative of a community is the reality. And I'll say, when I say, and I'm gonna start by talking about why. So the challenge that West Charlotte, that the West End currently has is that, yes, the dollar is not circulating because the long-term, when you look at areas that are marginalized like the West End, those businesses have now tried to sustain themselves with internal revenue without resources and opportunities that have created the studies that we talk about. Like in Charlotte, they did the upper mobility study, and they saw that being in Charlotte, if you were poor, your chances of getting out of being poor were minute because of where you live and some of the things were happening. And that is a product of what we see on that we saw and have seen on the West End. And so why is the narrative so important? If the narrative of the West End is a area that is disenfranchised, businesses won't come. So what is a resident what do you think a resident's gonna shop at? They're not gonna shop in the West End, they're gonna go outside of that. And so when they go outside of those areas, now that dollar leaves them. And you will have people that businesses that could actually come to the area will say, hey, look, you know what? We can't come to the West End because we don't see the dollar spend. But they are spending the dollar, they're not spending in that community. So what we're doing, and I talked about it earlier, is being intentional. So right behind you is a development. We decided, eFix Development Corp., I'm the owner of eFix Development Corp., we developed this center. It could have been torn down and made into a monstrosity, but we saw a historic value of saving the community, but doing something that was a little bit more different and intentional. And this is where it gets into the solution of how do we change the narrative, but also change the rotation of our dollars outside of the community. You have to be very intentional. We not only purchased this site, but we purchased the site across the street. They were both at the time at Baysford Road in LaSalle, and there wasn't a lot of development on this end of the corridor. We went in, and our goal was to try and figure out how do we address the same things you talked about, Jonathan. How do we get the dollar to circulate? So it wasn't an easy push, but we were able to get both of these buildings under contract, and we were able to get two anchor tenants, which were a TD Bank and a Chase Bank. So now having a bank at these locations were iconic because it helped not only fund the development, but it also gave the opportunity to ensure that those two businesses would hire from the local community. Chase stepped up first, and Chase hired their staff from the community. The person that actually runs the Chase branch actually lived in the West End corridor. The people that were hired on for the TD Bank as well, they were actually someone from the community, but the commitment was that they would hire and engage in the community. So now you have two banks that are sitting on a major part of the West End corridor that are committed to hire and engage the local community. That's getting your dollars to circulate back in the community and engagement, because now you're going to get transactional services and loan services that weren't getting before. But we took it a step further. And this is, again, I like to talk about the problem, but being the solution is when you get to be intentional. So we have a coffee shop called Archive. Now, again, we were told a coffee shop at this location would not be viable, even though the community wanted. The first thing we did was, as a developer, I came in without the developer hat. I came in with the community hat, because I knew going in, being a president of a neighborhood for 15 years, I understood the community more, I understood development. But coming in from the development, I knew that we had to do something different for the West End. So our broker got with a young lady who had an idea of a vintage that was already selling vintage items online. Now, she was from the community. She lived in the West End, grew up in the West End, but she had an idea of selling vintage. But her idea did not include coffee. So a partnership was formed where we took her idea of what she was currently doing, gave her a mentor that was in coffee, and those two together married and became what is called Archive. When they said Archive couldn't exist, Archive sold out in coffee its first 3 weeks, and their coffee starts, I think, at $6 a pop. Average about 10. So they're selling $6 to $7 coffees at this shop, and they sell out. And it has become a center of engagement networking opportunities in the corridor, which circulates the dollar, and also gave an opportunity from a small business owner from the local community to have an opportunity to have a business in the area. Right next door was a bridal shop, and their family, the owner's family, had owned retail in the Batesboro Road corridor for a while, and so now they have a shop there, and now they're 6 months out in sales. The reason why I'm saying this is because when you look at these areas, people will create a narrative that we can't do business and build businesses in our communities, but we can. It takes a little different, it takes a little bit more effort, and sometimes going outside the norm. Again, Archive was a incubator that we built and put together and married. From a developer side, I had to do something that was different. I knew going in that if I wanted this project to be successful, but also wanted the West End to have a spark and set the tone, we did what no one developer wanted to do. All of our smaller spaces, except for Chase and TD Bank, so you have the Archive Coffee Shop, you have the bridal shop, and you also have a bakery that was coming in. And on the other side, you have a juice bar and a nail salon. All of our small businesses are owned by minority women currently, and we built out all their spaces. Developers aren't doing that, but I knew going in, if I wanted them to be successful, we could not allow them to go in and have not only a upfit cost loan, but also an operating equipment loan, and then have to face whether or not in a marginalized community whether their business will be successful. So we worked intentionally to make sure that we built in a success. So going back to your question, yes, Batesboro Road at the time has seen their dollars leaving the community, but being intentional with all the groups. And again, it isn't just an eFix Development Corp initiative. This was working with local organizations like Historic West End Partners, working with the city of Charlotte, working with LIST, and working with all of our partners across the board. Even our brokers and realtors played a major part in culminating and helping create the synergy that helped build the initiatives that we're seeing happening today. So it's getting everyone on board at all levels to be engaged and be intentional. And what happens on the backside of that is we hired, so when you ride past these developments, the individual that cleans the lots and keeps the area clean for us was a guy named Bo. And I tell you Bo because Bo lived up on that house when I first met him. He was sleeping in a house and they were behind these developments, but he was excellent at cutting grass. We saw the potential in Bo, and we not only offered him to cut our residential side tenants, but we also said, Bo, I want to give you a corporate job and let you maintain our properties. Why? Because I wanted to live up to the creed of creating up mobility. So it's not just about talking about what you want to do. As communities and as individual investors and as just humanity, we've got to be intentional about how we reshape and build our communities. So we drive, you can drive.
Yeah, Christopher, I know, and I'm going to give you enough time to really get into your commercial development, your real estate development projects. And I hate to interrupt somebody, but
No, you're fine.
I'm going to ask a few other questions before we get back into the topics. The one thing I'm looking at is you have the proximity directly within a mile or so to Uptown. And the one area that I'm still concerned with and just want to find out, do the residents in the West End of Charlotte have the access to go into Uptown and get the business opportunities through employment that would be beneficial to the West End and to their self?
Right now, I think the transit system, so there is opportunity for transit. Charlotte, the major, for the people in this West End corridor, the major transportation vehicles, but they don't own cars, is the bus systems. They do have access to bus systems. They're working on, there is a plan to bring the trolley from downtown, which I think will add a lot more access and opportunities to create the transportation needed to get to the jobs. But we've seen, I think, across the board since COVID, because I think the model of work has changed and the scope has changed since COVID. So a lot of people are not actually commuting downtown for jobs. They have a lot of jobs that are now online or they're working from home. So I think that's been a major shift in some of the efforts. But to answer your question, transportation is always a challenge when you're looking at areas that are marginalized and growing. Right now they have the bus systems, and the future is to bring the trolley from downtown all the way down Baseball Road up to 80 close to 85. So it's I think we're moving in the right direction. Right now there are some challenges, but Charlotte Baseball Road in West End is one of the highest one of the highest commutable areas in Charlotte. So when you look at traffic patterns, I think Baseball Road runs in the top three.
But you're saying the transportation system that many of the residents don't own cars, but you do have the public bus transportation system, don't you? And don't that go directly into Uptown Charlotte?
Yes, that's what I mentioned. They have the
Okay.
bus system that's there, and the bus system is sufficient to get individuals that they want to get around the city there, and then look at the future plans for the trolley, which will actually the streetcar, which will come down the entire that will come down Basement Road. I think will open up more doors for opportunities.
Okay, Christopher, I don't really want to mix apples and oranges because I know you're emphasizing a lot of your development with commercial development and real estate development in the west end of Charlotte, and that's the area you really want to target and develop. But I would say as you're going in that direction or you're in that process, if you have a strong economic sector that people claim Charlotte has, particularly with your uptown and your banking and your other businesses and your other industries, while you're trying to develop and bring the west end of Charlotte back to the level that it needs to be, wouldn't the good opportunities that currently exist in Charlotte, I would say to me, and I'm an outsider, I would be concerned with contract opportunities. I would be concerned with employment opportunities. I would be concerned with higher wage income levels. And you could be concerned with the commercial development and the real estate development. You can deal with affordable housing in the west end of Charlotte. And I think you can do it simultaneously if you, like you mentioned, you're true intended to make a plan where it could be beneficial to people. So just kind of clarify, are you concerned with those other factors of the employment opportunities, the wage disparities, the business opportunities that currently exist in Charlotte that might be excluding people in the west end of Charlotte?
I'm told, Jonathan. So again, like I said, I'm a developer, but I wear a community hat, and I sit back and I look at three things that really are a challenge for me out of your statement. One is the housing crisis.
Mhm.
We're seeing, I mean, we know right now, even Wall Street Journal had an article that came out recently that said it was cheaper to rent than to buy a home. We're seeing that in record numbers. Just today, there was a house that came on the market for 200,000, and I think they had over 12 offers within the first 5 hours of being on the market. And first-time home buyers are having a challenge in buying homes now. So if you want to be an American dream, it's hard right at this point to actually do that, along with the coupling fact across the board of the rising interest rates. So housing is a major issue, and affordable housing is even a major issue. I think a bigger issue, but I will tell people that affordable housing is an issue, but when you look at affordable housing, workforce housing, which is the people that are working in areas that just can't afford to the basic rents. So yes, there's a huge challenge around housing. Second, the wages. I think we talk about that's a crisis. I know there's a lot of people on both sides of the fence talking about looking at ways to either increase the wages or look at the impacts it's having. We're seeing inflation rise. I mean, I think it's countrywide. So and wages have not been able to keep up with the inflation. And so the average income, I think, is around $21 an hour. I want to make sure that number is right. I think it's $21 an hour is the average income, or 60,000 a year is the average income for housing in Charlotte. And it's a challenge. So housing is one and wages is another. And when you look at the educational factors, that's the third one that impacts me, is that we're seeing a lot of challenges around individuals who are getting high school and college degrees but can't find jobs. So
Mhm.
all those factors, those two factors to me are challenges. And whether or not we do a great development or we work with real estate in any regards, that doesn't solve those problems. It in some regards, and I'm always cautious in saying it, we're trying to create jobs and opportunities, but at the same time, when development comes, you do see rising costs. And those are some of the offsets that we have to look at and be intentional in making sure that we are trying to do across the board, but it's a challenge. So
Well, Christopher, Christopher, isn't the cost of housing in the west or the west end of Charlotte a lot cheaper than other areas like Ballantyne and Uptown and Myers Park and other more affluent areas? So wouldn't, even though housing costs is rising overall in Charlotte, you would still be able to get I guess, a cheaper form of housing stock in the west end of Charlotte comparable to other areas, or is that changing too?
well, it goes back to perspective though. So when you say, is it cheaper than the south side of Charlotte? It's cheaper in respect to the people that live on south side looking back at the west side,
Mhm.
but people that live on the west side saying, hey, I can't afford south side, and now I can't afford it either. So now I gotta look at other areas which are further out, like Gastonia and Rock Hill, to move to. So I think the perspective of what's expensive is based upon where you are. And also, I think the individuals, when you look at the average median income of the individuals that are living in South Park, they have their income levels a lot higher. So when you come back to the west side, come back to areas that are similar to the west end, and you start looking at what the average median incomes are, their income now dictates what they can buy. So right now, the average household, the average housing price on the west end is around 250 to 300. That's expensive. And you tack in today's interest rates, you're looking at a payment of around 17 to $2,000 a month. That's
Mhm.
not affordable for a lot of people.
I think the one reason, I mean, and I'm not going to dispute that 250,000 or 300,000 is not expensive, but you're hearing prices in Charlotte over $500,000. Homes 1.5 or 6 years ago that you could get for about $300,000 have now gone double. So
Yeah.
I think the issue is, and unfortunately we are running out of time. I'm going to have to do a part two on this segment because we're just really scratching the surface. But if you're only making minimum wage or low wage sector, even if you have a home that's $150,000, if you're only making $10 an hour, that's going to be like a person, I would say $25 an hour trying to buy a $500,000 home. So I think the wages got to be taken into the factor to go along with the housing costs, even in the west end of Charlotte.
I think that's an issue across the board. But yeah, I mean, you see it, you see the impacts more when you start looking at areas like the West End. And how do you change that wage factor? You gotta continue to bring businesses and opportunities into those corridors that are willing to hire from the local community and give them higher wages. So when you're bringing in a company, you got to make sure that they're willing to hire from the local community versus hiring outside that community and bringing people in. And I think that helps. But again, it's a challenge we've seen across the board.
Well, see, here's the thing, and again, I'm an outsider that seems confusion. You're hearing a big development project going on, a proposal of another west end of Charlotte or west side of Charlotte, there, Charlotte Douglas International Airport.
Yep.
They're talking about a huge mixed-use development project that's going to transform over the next 10 to 15 years.
Yep.
And can that be duplicated beyond just that area? I'm not expecting to put that type of pressure on you, but can you see a 10 to 15-year development project in the west side of Charlotte that could have a huge impact beyond what currently exists?
I don't want to say I see it. I know it's coming.
Okay.
They've already got projects that are slated. They're building, they're building housing developments right now, all across Charlotte. And you've got Tuskegee and those areas now are booming with development. So I mean, they're coming. I mean, they're already in the works and coming. I think people are waking up, and so again, when you I always tell people when you say the word gentrification, two people hear two different things. Some people hear fear, and some
Mhm.
people hear opportunity. And the people that see opportunity understand that right now the West End is where they should be looking to find opportunities to buy and build and grow. But again, I always caution people that you have responsibility to the community, because those people that hear fear are the ones that are going to be impacted. And how do we help and engage and keep them intact? And that's making sure that we provide jobs and opportunities and open up resources for them. And that's the challenge.
Well, one thing, Christopher, shouldn't the homeowners in the West End of Charlotte not be discouraged and, let's say, keep their homes because the property values are going to increase?
I, again, and now I'm gonna tell you, that's $1 million question that we did. I wish I could solve, because it's based on education. You take a person that's never seen $200,000 and you offer them that money, that that could change their whole trajectory, but it's not enough to change their lives, because they're going to be taxed on it, and they're going to take care of some bills, and they're going to end up with not 200, but now 75,000. And that 75,000 is not going to allow them to go buy a house anywhere else. So now they're back in the same situation in less than a year. So education is key to helping people leverage and understand how to use their equity. Because I always tell people there's 3 points. If I can help educate you, I can help get you to understand how what you currently have you can drive. If I can help ensure that you have opportunities and access to resources, we can help you utilize the education that you acquire. And then third, creating generational wealth, getting into looking at ways to grow your dollar outside of just your job, using your equity in your home to open up a coffee shop or open up the business that you really want, and being a part of the growth and not a part of the movement of the change. And I think that's the key thing to answer your question is education. How can we better educate homeowners and people in the community on how to stay in the community and be a part of the growth of the community? And that's where a lot of my passion lies at.
Christopher, those are going to have to be your last words, but let's work on a part two, because I think we didn't really, and I don't feel like I got giving you a chance to really talk about your development and your business plans the way it should have been distributed. So I'm going to work on getting you a part two. And let's just say we did an introduction this afternoon, but the part two is going to be the solutions. It's going to be the results. It's going to be the blueprint. And I think we can definitely work on a game plan towards that level. But you provided some good, insightful information, and I appreciate you being available under short notice. And let's work on the game plan. And I think stay encouraged and continue doing what you're doing down there, because you're really making a difference. And I'm glad it was giving people I guess, an opportunity to be exposed to some of the development and some of the plans that you are involved with.
Well, awesome, John. I say hats off to you and what you're doing, because the more we talk about our communities and the more we talk about the change that happen in the communities, the more we can create the education and also drive the intentionality to create the change for others to follow. So I'm excited to be a part, and let me know. I'm always available.
Okay, that's good to know. Good last encouraging words to end this particular program. And I definitely wish you the best of I wish you the best of luck in the very near future.
Awesome.
Okay. All right. Again, this is Jonathan Small. I had enjoyed hosting this edition of Face to Face. Face to Face could be one of two different talk shows that I broadcast here live to tape every week at WIN TV Studios in Windsor, Connecticut. Also have the luxury of hosting and producing a talk show, Face to Face, or All About You, on the AccessTV.org network. So definitely I'm going to continue to market both studio operations throughout the week. And until you see me again, for people out there, have a very peaceful, blessed day. Thank you.